me know when you sign on, Leah. We're good? Okay. I'm going to call the planning board meeting of October 10th, 2024 to order. We have a quorum. First item on the agenda is approval of the September, oh, actually, let me ask if there's any continuances or anything, Ms. Hitchin?
There are not.
Okay. First up is the approval of the September 12th planning board minutes that were sent to us via email from Ms. Hitchin. What is the board's pleasure? Well, I just, one discussion point on the bottom of page 2, where it says Mr. Lopes replied that street lighting is not typically required on the cul-de-sac. It's the option of the developer, not the building official, I believe. Just make that one correction. Oh, go ahead, Kate.
Page number 1, public hearing for the Carnegie minor subdivision. It said Ms. Wilson asked about tying back into the drainage line on Dexter Street, and does that lead to the East Main Road? I also asked that if a write-up permit was also necessary.
Okay, so there's 2 edits. Could you amend your motion?
Yeah, I'd like to.
And
That's the rest of the minutes as written.
all right, Mr. Garceau. All right. Any discussion on the motion? Got a motion made and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is West Shore Solar, owner Carnegie Trails LLC, AP 26, Lot 13, 226 West Shore Road. Request for a modification to the final plan regarding a reduced perimeter fence line, removal of pool area from scope of work, and adjusted stone trenches per CRMC comments, continued from our May 8th and September 12th, 24 planning board meeting, excuse me. And I am going to recuse myself due to a long-standing conflict with the Carnegie Group, and Mr. Harding is going to handle this hearing.
Right, who is representing them and?
Good evening, Mr. Harding, members of the board. Just to refresh your recollection, it's been a long time since May 8th of this year. We're here on a matter that almost always is handled in an administrative way. We had a final approval of this project. All aspects of it went through master plan, public hearing, preliminary plan, public hearing, final approval, everything approved. And then because it's the way it has to go, the project then went to CRMC after the local approval process. CRMC did not change the drainage program in any material way. They approved it, but asked that we add certain features to the drainage to assist in water quality, not infiltration trenches, not features that will increase the drainage capacity of the stormwater system, but mostly water quality trenches. They asked that they be repositioned to work more properly. But those trenches had never been part of the the engineered drainage calculations for the stormwater system to begin with. They were belts and suspenders things beyond that. So normally that would be handled administratively. We came forward at a time that was very unusual. As the report of the town's consultant indicates, there were weather events occurring at that time and in the preceding months that had not been seen forever. And the site was still under construction. The soils and the grasses that were meadow grasses that were part of the drainage program had not grown in. And so they were the kind of a perfect storm, to use a word that has several applications here occurring at that time. There was heightened public interest in the issue, and as I see happen often, the decision was made not to have something done in somebody's office, but to bring it out in the public forum like this before the planning board. What became clear at that meeting is that there were a lot of opinions that were made, registered about why this was happening. There was some notion that somehow the modification to the drainage approved by CRMC had somehow unleashed this water on the downland properties that had not been seen before, and that it had something to do with something we did in connection with our drainage program. There were people downstream that were complaining about water issues. It became clear that there'd been water issues for a long time in that area, and a lot of it has to do with West Shore Road having no stormwater controls. But the overarching place that hearing went, and I think it was the right place, was that this is a technical issue that needed to be addressed by engineers, and preferably engineers that are not either one of the parties or working for one of the parties, that were working for the town, trying to get it straight, get everybody's stories, and do their own independent review. And that's what happened here with Verdantis. We had our own engineer testify last time that the stormwater program and all the drainage calculations were always worked, even before these minor enhancements to water quality that CRMC required. The drainage worked without that. We've done nothing to increase the rate or volume of the water coming off this site. That was the opinion of our engineer. Verdantis looked at it, and their report contains no indication that there's anything that we've done. They interviewed abutters. They took surveys from 5 different people who chose to respond. They looked at all the CRMC materials. They looked at the drainage calculations. They went out there themselves. They went out in the rain. They observed conditions on West Shore Road and produced a definitive report that doesn't challenge anything that we presented at the May 8th hearing. They focused in particular on some alterations that were made outside of the solar array downstream by the owner of the property, not something that was called for on our plans, that needs to be approved by CRMC, and somebody should go to CRMC to do that. It didn't surprise me at all that an independent engineer would come to that conclusion. And so there's no suggestion that what was done there is bad, but there is an emphatic recognition that the person that carried out that work, and it certainly wasn't anybody that was doing it for us, should have had permits to carry that work out. But no, Verdantis didn't say that work somehow is causing the problems. So yes. That's outside of the solar. That's outside of the solar array completely. It's at the it's on the north side of the property at the bottom of the hill. It was a road that was brought in there, and I suspect and have no reason to believe that wasn't an attempt by this person who's here and can speak for himself to try to improve something in that area. It just wasn't done in a good way. I've got one more thing to say, and it's about, well, before I do, the other thing in the report that jumps out is that the pre-development conditions of this property had 160,000 square feet more of impervious area, pavement, all kinds of things that disappeared as a result of this project. So we're, really talking about 4 acres of land that's now impervious. The report notes how the meadow grass is in earnest. Pardon me? That's now pervious. That was impervious. I think I said it backwards. The meadow grass is in, it's doing what it was supposed to do. There's some sediments that have collected there, mostly as a result of my client not wanting to change the status quo of what's going on out there. Those are maintenance issues that obviously need to be addressed, but the site's stabilized. There's no indication on this record with the neutral input that there's any issue here. The standard before the court, before the board, is this. We're talking about a modification to an approved final plan. Is there anything that's happened that shows that the criteria on which that final plan was approved is no longer satisfied by something that we've done? And there's nothing that's been presented in that regard. You had to find that the project was consistent with the comp plan, complied with the zoning ordinance. If it was a subdivision, no impracticality to building, feasibility. And then, is there a material adverse health, safety, or welfare issue that's created by what's been presented to you? You didn't find that was the case the first time this went through every step of the hearing. And there would be no basis for finding that now as to these changes that were an improvement in water quality, but really had nothing to do with drainage.
First thing is, you never said your name for our record.
Oh, I'm sorry. William Landry, Bush and Kavanaugh, representing Kearsarge Energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, there's been numerous times that people have had the best of engineers, used the best of their calculations, and promised that these people next door wouldn't get flooded in numerous occasions. But the end result is people came in here with videos of mudslides coming in their yard, filling their pool. So it's very understandable that if there are any abutters, no matter what the paperwork says, if they've been there for 50 years, so their family's been there and they've never seen it, it's very understandable why they may want to question.
I agree.
Because it's been engineered doesn't mean, and the moving of dirt that the landowner would have done was probably done in a good gesture, because there obviously wouldn't play with dirt for no reason. There was obviously a problem that came that caused them to try to fix without minimum, not turning it into a big deal. I don't know all the facts of the thing, but everything that at least the way that I've seen what you said makes perfect sense. That if we have all the facts and everything that you guys did met all the criteria, and it just happened to be a 1 in 100 year, and you designed for 1 in 50 year or a 20-year storm, and you're not required to design something like that, then unfortunately, as much as people downstream don't want to hear it, you're not responsible for some out of the ordinary stuff that there would be in water. I've just been on this board a long time, and I've seen there's nothing better than the hard truth from the people that live in a place than anybody else. But again, like you said, that meadow grass needed to grow. This stuff happened before the grass matured. You said that you actually took impervious and made it pervious. All these things should have made it better, shouldn't have caused, certainly wasn't the cause of anything, and if you hadn't done what you did, it would have been much worse.
Yeah,
I understand that.
And I certainly didn't mean to suggest that we thought there was anything wrong with people being concerned. It was just the opposite. I was
Yeah.
not surprised that people was concerned. If I lived in that neighborhood, I probably would be concerned too. There
Yeah.
was something different that was occurring then. It's clear from the report there are serious drainage issues in that area, but people had not seen anything quite like that. But they had extraordinary storms and a site that wasn't protected the way it was designed to be protected, and that it's protected now.
Right. I know if I had a backhoe and I owned the land, I know I'd play around with her.
You're right behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you mentioned it, though, one of the biggest things that struck me is this construction scale, 59,000. Confirming that happened is important. I guess understanding that the Vantage report is an independent third-party engineering corroboration of the condition. And I say that your position on their recommendation to submit an application for alteration to the non-permitted work, it did happen, and that,
Well, no, I think that we have to cooperate in whatever we have to do for that to get in front of CRMC. The property owner obviously has to be an applicant. But we would not resist or interfere with that. If that were a condition to a final plan approval, that, prior to the building permit stage, that be attended to, that certainly would not be an issue for us, right? Well, no, but it's part of the lot that's the subject of this permitting. And it's under the control of the person who did the work. So he certainly would have standing to pursue that application. If for some reason CRMC was looking to us to also be a co-applicant or to somehow consent to that, we would certainly do that, because we went through CRMC, as did the owner, together with the owner, to get the CRMC permits that would be modified.
So this, let's say downstream of you guys' modification, that came before the historic rain and flood, that modification? Or due to that, there were modifications to the land?
I don't know what
It's
the
hard to think that
sequence
if
was.
there was never a water problem, no one's ever had a problem, and just out of nowhere, the landowner decided to mess around and do things outside of your thing. There had to have been a reason for doing that, and it was, if it was done after the rainwater came in, it was trying to be a cure for that problem. If it was before there was a problem, or all along there was a problem, and it was trying to, knowing that it needed to be repaired ahead of time, I guess we'll have to find out. I'd like to, if you have any other witness, or would it be better if there's anybody here in the audience that would like to talk, that then your expert could answer some questions.
No, I have nothing further to present. Our expert is here. I know the Verdantis gentlemen are here as well, and you may want to hear from them, but I have nothing further.
Yes, all that it is if there is anybody in the audience that would like to pipe in and ask some questions to feel better, we'd like to hear from then, and if there are
course.
questions, then Lynn Small or anybody could answer their question, make them feel better or something.
Sure.
Just
Yep.
one more for the petitioner, and it sounds like it may be the responsibility. Well, their knowledge is the intent to, press the changes to restore the condition of that property that you have control of under the, as a petitioner, so that it's not, no longer not permitted work, or to do an application or a co-application.
I think we're gonna have to sort that out. We don't have control over that property. It's not, it's not.
I'm sorry, that's what you said, so I'm
Yeah.
No, it's part of the lot, but our property is really, our project is within the fence, and this stuff's occurring outside of the fence. But to the extent we're required to be a co-applicant by CRMC or something like that, we're willing to do that. And I'm not sure what that's going to look like. If it's going to be an attempt to keep the modifications that were made in place, or for the property to be restored, I'm not, we're gonna have to, we're gonna have to sort that out, but we've gotta come out from it with the property has to come out of it with a permitted condition.
So in our agenda tonight, it says, request for modification to the final plan regarding a reduced perimeter fence line, removal of pool area from scope of work, and adjust stone trenches per CRMC comments. Is there a pool area? Or what is that you're trying to remove? That it sounds like
I
something.
think I may have to ask my client to address that. I'm not sure that's an issue anymore. Is the pool still an issue, Andrew?
There was a pool area and when the plan,
Yeah, come on up, please state your name.
Andrew Bernstein, Kearsarge Energy, thank you. There was a pool area that still exists, and when the plans were drawn and sent to CRMC, mistakenly on the plan, it was half the pool area would be covered with solar panels, which made no sense, which we never did. That's the only issue. We asked the owner of the land to go back to CRMC and do that modification, and he didn't want to sign the application. We had Lynn prepare a whole application, and he wasn't prepared to go ahead because we found that well after the fact that no one picked it up, that was just a mistake on the plan because we weren't close to this area with panels.
And is there any harm with it being where, open where it is, the pool?
No, we haven't touched it.
That doesn't constitute an alteration.
I was leading to.
We didn't do anything. It would have done just the opposite if we covered in and filled in a pool. So we didn't do anything.
But you're asking for modifications to allow this filling in. So does CRMC have to know that and change things?
We did not fill the pool in.
I think what it's,
Yeah, so you're not gonna bother, so that we,
they meant to
Remove it
fill
from
it
the
in.
scope of work.
yeah, okay,
This is just removing it from the scope, it's not.
Yeah,
okay,
right. It was a mistake on the drawings.
okay. Okay, thank you. Is there anybody here in the audience that has questions or would want to? Anybody online? Leah?
If there's anybody that has a question or comment, please virtually raise your hand and I can elevate you. None noted.
All right, do you want to make a motion?
No, I'm just reading what's after this.
Yeah.
Final plan.
No, it has nothing to do with that, and it's a recommendation from CRMC, from what their plan, what they're responsible for. They're just, since it went to them after we approved it, this is just something that they commented on. And they're looking for us to accept that. So we're supposed to kind of accept or modify our last approval by including the adjustment of the stone trenches. And what's the story on the reducing perimeter fence line? What's that about?
There was a modification in the fence line, correct, Andrew? It's just inside. It's closer to the, it's brought south, I guess, toward the solar array. That was an arrangement that was made with the landowner to move the fence line. It has no real impact on
So
anything.
what is the purpose of change? If there's an existing fence there now, what's the advantage or
I think it was
disadvantage?
pulled in. The existing conditions are the change
Why not?
location, correct?
The landowner requested that we move the fence in two places. He was building a road around it,
Yeah.
couldn't make the turn as well, and wanted to pull it in. So we said sure, because we were pulling it further away from the wetlands.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, and I could be wrong. Their final permit is in their world. What happens outside of what their world is has nothing to do with their application.
Right.
Is that right, Leah?
Yeah,
But this non-permitted work,
happened on the same property.
it's on the same part, it's part of the lot.
It's part of the lot, but it's not part of the project.
No.
So the real,
Outside the project boundary that was given to CRMC.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is part of the lot, so, and there was a solar project so to the extent that Mr. Chappelle needs us to consent to whatever he's gonna file to deal with this situation, we would cooperate in that, but I'm not sure we'd have standing on our own to go and deal with things that have occurred.
But if, I guess my question is, if what you've done and is planned is not going to affect anybody, then there should be no need for Mr. Chappelle to do any modifications to stop it from getting any worse downstream. It sounds, tell me if I'm wrong, that there was a problem coming off the property, and Mr. Chappelle was trying to do something about it to stop it from getting any worse. And maybe when Mr. Chappelle comes up, he might bring some light to it, because if there is too much water, or if that water was only during that event that is way over and beyond what your design criteria in, a 50-year storm or 20-year storm, then it's just a rare event. But I'm anxious to see it. With Mr. Chappelle.
Yeah, I think, I think we have to, I'm not gonna cast aspersions on Mr. Chappelle. I just
Yeah, there should be
wouldn't
no
do
reason.
that, but I do think we all may think we're doing something that's great from an engineering perspective, but it doesn't mean that it is if we're not an engineer, and it certainly doesn't mean that it's a great idea if the permits haven't been secured to do it. So I think, it's a question of expert analysis here, not lay analysis. There may be a lot of lay people that have an idea of what might be a better way to push around dirt and accomplish, and maybe this is making it better, maybe it's not. But I do think that's a question of expert input.
Thank you. Mr. Bell, to come up, please.
Orchard Bell, 80 Evans Way. It was very frustrating. You're trying to play nice, and they were playing nice, but what is here is for 3 modifications, and I think you need to understand them. One is to change the fence line, one is to not include the pool, and one is to change a drainage plan from what you approved to what CRMC modified to. Let's talk about Court's improvements. Court's improvements were on the north side of the existing fence. The existing fence is the fence that they're asking to move. Everything that Court did was inside the fences of the inside the LOD, land disturbance, submitted to Coastal Resources as this project, inside. There became, and Verdantis met with me, and I thank them for doing it. They spent a lot of time with me. And I sent them pictorial evidence that during the construction and during one very hellacious rain season, there was a major problem down there. Nobody more than me wants meadow grass to fix this thing, and it might do that. I don't think we should be voting to change things today until the meadow grass is in and we go through a spring, but the meadow grass might fix it. But while the meadow grass wasn't fixing it, I was smart enough as a lawyer, apparently too dumb to do it right, but smart enough not to operate inside the LOD. There was no room to operate inside the LOD based on where the fence lines were. I didn't have any right to make them move the fence. They put the fence in the wrong place by 2 feet for 500 feet over on the east side that has nothing to do with anything. And if that was the modification, we'd have come in here and said, the fence is 2 feet off. It's a Court and them problem, whether they're 2 feet further onto my property, but has absolutely nothing to do with distances to any neighbors, setbacks, or anything. I said, you've encroached 2 feet, move the fence. They said, you're gonna make me move 500 foot of fence? I said, no, I'm gonna make you move a couple 100 foot of fence, because unless you move it over here, I can't fix the problem that you keep ignoring. But when you move this fence on the east side, that will create a 15 to 20 foot area where I can do this unpermitted work that really was in, I worked, that retention pond that you see was in an area that was meadow grass, because when you move the fence 20 feet, you now had the meadow grass that was planted, and I put that in there. Where the fence moved, there was a path that was around it that, yes, we put in gravel road. So everything that we did was inside the LOD. When you grant them permission to move the fence, I was coming here to say, I don't care if they move the fence. I asked them to move the fence. Of course you can have them move the fence. But now it's, once you move the fence, I'm only responsible inside the fence. You're responsible outside the fence, so you go apply to coastal. Not gonna happen. I'm gonna apply to a superior court, but I'm not applying to coastal. So you shouldn't move the fence until we, the people responsible for building this, the owner and them, figure out a way to go to coastal to make this right. That's the fence argument. The pool was the pool that Pearson Yachts used to float their boats in. It's 60 by 40, 16 feet deep. It was always outside the fence line, but inside, some of it was because of the way they drew the LOD inside the LOD. And it was just a shading era between master and preliminary where it was shaded to have concrete removed. So when coastal saw it, it looked like 3/4 of that pool had to be removed. Neither one of us noticed it, and quite frankly, it was a mistake. I noticed it on the first day where they were clearing all the land. There was an excavator trying to poke a hole in the bottom of my pool. I called them. They stopped it immediately. They said, we'll fix this and apply. I have no objection to not including the pool. It is my opinion from a town's point of view that whether the pool stays or goes is absolutely irrelevant,
as to your approvals. It is down gradient and has nothing to do. The only drainage problem that I see, whether it will still exist with meadowgrass, is to the north. It is not to the west. The wetlands to the west, and this pool is way over in the northwest corner and in an area where all the water is going in a way that's not affecting our neighbors. So the pool, and I have no objection to. I have to agree, according to my lease, to plan changes. I agree to the pool. I have to agree to fences. I agreed to the fences. I'm now, think I got sandbagged agreeing to the fences because now all of a sudden it's my problem outside of the fences, but that's for another day. What you were here for was drainage. I don't think Verdentis got it right, but they were great to me and they listened, and I don't have a right to out-engineer them. My problem is what their report says is that it doesn't, is that as-built matches coastal's plan, the coastal approved plan. I'd have stipulated to that. That's not what we're trying to modify. They were trying to modify the plan that you approved. Coastal changed the plan, and now they're changing it to say, I want it approved as-built. Although I have to approve it, I also have to be reasonable. So I said, as long as it works, what do I care? But unfortunately, we lived through a hellacious year where it did not work. So I said, prove to me it works, and we're all set. They removed 159,000 square foot of pervious material. There is no doubt that a 5-year-old can tell you there should be less water leaving the site. The issue isn't to me. So if you're familiar with the site at all, the area along West Shore Road had 2 parking lots that were already, I don't know whether Lynn called them pervious or impervious, but they were gravel parking lots and the gravel had already been removed. So if they're counting them, that is removed from when it was industrial site, but not removed since 2017, that gravel had been removed. But those were the gravel parking lots in the front. Once you got a few hundred feet in, you got what we call the pads of all the buildings that still exist. But in between all of those pads and all around those pads were cement driving areas to drive all the boats. And there was an awful lot of cement removed. And I guarantee that less should be leaving now than should be leaving then. That makes sense. The question isn't less is leaving. It's, can we look at less is leaving north as opposed to less is leaving west? Because if you cut west by 40%, those neighbors will go, thank you for your design, God bless you. But if north increased by 20%, that is not the same thing. That's the same lawsuit we had down at Clemens Market about whether overall you did this, but shouldn't we be looking at the watersheds differently? I tried to point out to Verdentis that Lynn came and told you last time that the ASFF, area of stormwater flow, let's call it what it is, a trench. She had the trench from the pre-existing condition from West Shore Road running west to the coastal feature and to that area of wetlands. She did not have it running east back to West Shore Road. Innocent mistake, but it's wrong. When water, because it runs west, it from a point that I call 25 or 30 feet from the bridge, and I'm pretty sure Verdentis, who was shown it, is not going to suggest that I changed the direction that flowed. As I came here last time, when I got to that ASSF and dropped 2 ping pong balls, one went east and one went west. And I don't need an engineering degree to say that's where water, that's where it's heading this way, and that's where it's heading that way. So what I did was try to move more water west. But that design that they did, through no mistake of anybody, happened not to be accurate. When all the cement came out, there was an area that I showed Verdentis was leveled down by the bridge. I showed him it was leveled by showing pictures of monitoring wells that were in the area. The monitoring well stood after they were done clearing, stood 4 feet off the ground where, because when they took the bulldozer, they didn't bulldoze over the monitoring well. They bulldozed around it. So there was a cone that's in your picture. There's a cone and the ground is 2 or 3 feet higher there next to the bridge, the exact point where water goes west and water goes east. That's where this lake pools. And Verdantes has all the pictures. And Leah sat there up to her knees in water standing in that lake. And if that lake flows west, no neighbors get it to the north. If that flows east, it eventually goes into the wetland and then to the neighbors in the north. So if a contour was changed there, and Pearson Yachts had this was not an area that was cement. This was an area that was natural and full of trees, and there was some trees on that side when they were making it bigger. That triangle, to me, was designed to be that separator of water coming down into that lake to kick some west and some east. And it ended up leaving it pooling and more of it, in my opinion, going that way. Now, if they say that's not true, that's okay. I'm fine with that. But I believe that their job should have been not just, is it built according to the coastal plan, and not just did 159,000 square foot of pervious material being removed decrease the water leaving the site, but how did it affect whether it went to these neighbors that are complaining? And how did it affect whether it went in there? And what court's trying to do is move it further away from the neighbors, the same amount of water. So that, to me, is the issue. The other issue that I saw was they said in their report that the infiltration trenches matter. In fact, their recommendation is clean them out and put a maintenance program. If an infiltration system matters, then it should be there. Do we agree? I hope you say yes. The plan that you approved had 13,000 linear feet of infiltration trenches. They ran down every panel. Coastal Resources, in what we call belts and suspenders, changed that to 2,500 linear feet of filtration. Now, ask a 5-year-old. If a filtration system doesn't matter or a trench doesn't matter, I accept that. But if it matters enough to put into your independent report that they have to be cleaned and maintained, don't tell me that 80% more will dump or will infiltrate less water. That's just not possible, okay? So the other thing was, I was told Coastal changed them, and it made perfect sense. Rather than run them parallel with all of the solar panels, that would not run them parallel with the contours of the land. That would run them generally down to the northwest corner. If you take a trench and you put water in it, it will run downhill and it will spill out in the bottom. These are designed to go even and level, and they're designed to spill over and then sheet flow down the hill. But as they sheet flow down the hill, they'll run with the contours. The way they were designed, rightfully, wrongfully, they were going to run more northwest. And I assure you, there was going to be less water in the northwest corner. If this works, I don't care if they leave it the same. But as of right now, it's now that we have a mature meadow, we believe it's going to work. It didn't work last year when we didn't have a mature meadow. You want to change it today? Or do you want to see if it rains and we have a spring or a wet season? Because we know we have not had the rain in the last 6 months, right? All the storms were mostly October and March, right? Shouldn't we look at it then? I think, yeah. The other thing is that Verdantes not only pointed out that there were changes in the coastal plan made by me, they also, in good faith, clearly good faith, Presage worked with GZA Engineering. GZA Engineering, before you're independently looked at it and said, Houston, we've got a couple of problems. And they put a riprap and a retaining area up by the driveway to keep water off of West Shore. And they built up the very area that we're talking about by the road. by that bridge. So even inside their fence line, Verdante's pointed out that they made changes that aren't necessarily on the coastal plan as well. So if we all have to go to coastal, we all have to go to coastal. I'm not asking to put me in a better position or them in a better position, but I'm not asking that you put them in a better position, that's for sure. And by moving the fence and now saying it's my fences, I think that does that. So I think we need to work together and figure it out. I'm hoping that the meadow grass works. If it does, great. I think everybody has said that the ASSF, if permitted, would probably be approved. So we got to go do that. We got to go do that. And as I have emails to them, if they tell me that has to be filled in, I can fill it in an hour. But I'm going to take the hit from my neighbors not to flood them out for a year while everybody waits to go to coastal. That's what happened. Okay.
Trying to catch up to all this. Population there, things like this.
All right. So let me explain. I'm saying that when it was done, it was kind of leveled. Originally, I think the contours aren't supposed to change, and they're not huge, but as you go from an area, if there's this high spot that was put in by Pearson Yachts to divert water, and that got removed, the water then came a little bit further to the north, and that's where it created this lake effect. If the ASSF all ran east to west, it wouldn't have mattered. The lake would have entered the ASFF and it would have gone exactly where her plan had it, my plan had it, and we testified it would have gone. By that pushing north, it got to the tipping point of that ASSF and some went east and some went west. And that made more go in that direction, in my opinion. And that, there are a lot of pictures of this, but that is, I believe, what happened. The volume changed on what went there. And I think right now, I think the volume is pretty close because of what we tried to divert back. And I think maybe it all works. My concern is that I got to go to coastal and they say, put it back. And I've got the same nightmare I had before I did it. I think they didn't say that it worked, but I'm pretty sure nobody said it didn't work, or it wasn't at least better. If I am accurate that existing conditions were that one went east and one went west, and I believe Lynn said that at the last meeting, that she flew it with a drone or she got things, and unfortunately that piece was done. Nothing was touched there. All of our work was to the south of that. I think it, hopefully it's fixed, but now it has to be permitted as fixed. But I still think you have to say, your standard is not what Mr. Landry says. Your standard originally was clearly exactly what Mr. Landry says. You have to design to this storm and do that. That's not technically the question. Suppose you over-design the hell out of it. Suppose you approve 25,000 linear feet of filtration and you only, or 13,000, and to get by the statute, you only need 2,500. That's not the standard that I can modify it now, your approval, as long as I can prove that I didn't need it. As long as I can prove that it was belts and suspenders, I can take it away now. I promised you a Cadillac, but that Hyundai will get you to work. That's not the standard. The standard is, I'm trying to modify this. If what they did is the same as this, I'm your guy. If it's going to work, I'm your guy. But Verdantis was not asked to do that. And they're here. They didn't say, would this have changed the water on the north? And coastal probably dictates and tells us all to go to hell and they're going to do it their way anyway. So I get that, but that still, I don't think is the issue here today. Right. There's work that they did according to them. There's work that I did according to them. It's all inside fence lines, but I get that I get they're gonna blame me and I'm gonna blame them and we're gonna be able to do it one way or another. But I wanna say one. Okay. So, no, West Shore Road is just West Shore Road. But I think, well, it's outside of this jurisdiction, but they recommend it. They can speak for themselves, but I wasn't out there to be self-serving. I met with them and showed them everything I knew from living there 20 years. And that included that West Shore Road had no drainage. That included that 2 engineers that live on the end of West Shore Road had done things long before the solar farm to try to put swales in their yard and pipes down through. And that, at least historically, said at some point there had been problems. The issue isn't whether West Shore Road has its own problems.
Yeah.
It's whether in years that weren't excessive, once the meadow grass grew, was this making it worse, right? That was the issue. But we certainly just pointed out all that. They, I think, pointed out in their thing that West Shore Road should be looked at because there may be ways to make West Shore Road better. If West Shore Road drainage was fixed, the amount of water coming off here wouldn't be the issue. It's the combination of A and B, I think the neighbors will tell you that. And we had pictures. So if it pours, you can see that there's a problem, even though it's very discernible and measurable what comes off of the solar field or our property, because it comes out of one area on an overflow. But when it pours, it can take 5 hours to get there. There's where your infiltration trenches are. It rains, water goes onto the solar farm. It then fills however many linear feet of those trenches there are. Some goes down into the ground, not much with the soils down there. But when they're filled, they overflow. Then it comes down the hill further. Then it hits those retention areas that court put in. They work great on a 5-year storm or a 7-year storm or whatever the definition is until they don't. And then they overflow. So the infiltration trenches have volume and capacity, might not be the hugest amount in the world, but they contribute to not letting a heavy storm get there until they get filled. They handle a lot of water, and you can do the math of a 2-foot by 4-foot infiltration trench that's 13,000 foot long, but it's a lot of cubic gallons. And however many it is, it's 80% more than 1,300 feet of them. And that helps. Now, if they're belts and suspenders and they're not needed, I agree with that. But it only belts and suspenders. The belts and suspender analogy says, I don't need a belt and suspenders. That's overkill. But when the neighbors are saying, my pants are falling down, they want a belt and a suspender until it works. And then when one works, you say, well, pick which one you want to throw out. That's fine with me too. But I don't know that they're belt and suspenders until until grass works. And it's just not just grass. There's improvements that come along. The grass is there and the landscape gets bigger and everything about it should help.
And recommendation. They said it was not really within the jurisdiction of my fence line. But said that some of it's you, some of it's them. Are you saying that's all refers to within that 200-foot by foot border that you're referencing, or is there something else?
On the north side, I acknowledge it's our responsibility. They're the only ones saying it's my responsibility. So let's start with that. I believe that I'm an owner and we had to sign the assent. Them as the 99, the 25-year lease, and they did all of it, but I signed the assent. It always went in as our piece. And I don't disagree with them that if I went down to our neighboring property, because we own neighboring property there too, or even on 2613 outside of the area of disturbance of what was sent to coastal, that's something I did. I take a little offense that when I do it inside the area, limited area of disturbance, and I do it after I ask you to move the fence, and I got emails, no, that, you know, wasn't a surprise that this was done. It's not like I didn't discuss all of this. I actually sent Verdantes a copy of a letter from the lawyer where they wanted to mandate that I put that road in at least 4 inches to get it up. And I was like, this is temporary stuff I'm doing. I'm not agreeing to do this forever. This is using up other land of ours. But everything, I'm not criticizing them for good faith. They were trying to fix the problem but still trying to say, we'll fix the problem, but let's not go overkill to fix the problem, because Lynn tells us when the meadow grass comes, we're not gonna have a problem. So I can't spend too much money trying to fix a problem that I don't think exists. And if the problem doesn't exist, they didn't spend any money to fix it, that's great. If the problem still exists, then I think it's between them and us to try to do something about it. So, but moving, it's clearly both of us, if you don't agree to move the fences, because according to according to coastal, all that work done is gonna be in the, well, some of it is inside the fence, some of it is outside the fence, all of it is inside the area of disturbance. The LOD, I think they call it. All of it is, there is no work alleged to be done outside the LOD.
Whether the fence gets moved or not, is the original fence line their land to control?
Well, ultimately, the lease is that remember, it's all one piece. They have exclusive use and occupancy inside the fence line, except for the driveway. And I have exclusive use and occupancy outside the fence line.
Right, but, and so,
There's a maintenance agreement about the berms that's outside the fence line that they do, or supposed to do. I mean, you're kind of in bed together, in my opinion, but we are.
I'm just not sure. Let's put it this way, Lynn Small has never let us down on any.
I recommended her, Luke, and I'm not saying she did, because she came up here last time and said, people kick me and people hate me and then the grass grows and it's fine. And that might be true. But everybody says that it wasn't done when all the flooding was done. Now, we're talking March of 24. We're not talking 1963. We're talking last spring, it wasn't done. This growing season, it had to have a Herculean, it's grass, it looks good, but I don't know that it will have that effect. And if it does, great. I agree. I agree. And Verdantes says that the design that they did, they can speak for themselves, but that it meets the design standard and would have in the first instance. I asked them whether it's be better to have 13,000 feet of them. You can ask them that, because they're not gonna look in the eye and say no. But, and I'm saying, don't modify until it works. That's all. Set it down for April, see what happens. But if the spring comes, if all the neighbors come now, isn't what's gonna happen is, independently, they looked at it's not my fault, and apparently Chappelle did something outside. How is that good for everybody? How is that the right thing? If it's fixed, the neighbor says, thank you, everybody. I appreciate your efforts, Corsage. I appreciate your efforts, Planning Board. Court, I appreciate you standing up there and trying to advocate that we need to make sure this gets done. Everybody's happy. But if it doesn't work and you've already changed it, what do you do now? You can't put it back. You can't go and say, geez, now that I'm thinking we should have had 80% more trenches, I already modified that.
Yeah, I just think since we have a third party that's looked at it, all that what was done is what's designed, and just the grass had not grown in. I don't think.
Oh, Again, if that's your opinion, that's great, but I want you to be exactly clear what they said. They said that it is built generally, except where they pointed out it wasn't, in accordance with the CRMC plan. They stipulate that it's not built according to the plan you approved. One has no contour changes, and they didn't do any surveys and didn't do any elevations. And one has 80% more trenches. So they are not telling you that it's built according to what you approved. They're telling you it's built according to what Coastal approved.
So-
I stipulate to that close enough. I get it. Not at all. We do it all the time.
And let's just say, we never say, the heck with CRMC, we know better, and that we wanted to go to what we are. At least.
But we're not invited to CRMC. Well, this time I'm gonna be. Right? And again, I have no reason to not accept it, but I do know that if I were putting in 13,000 foot of trenches as opposed to 2,500 foot of trenches, I saved a lot of money. So if Coastal said, well, try this new thing, I'd probably be nodding my head. Or if I suggested to them, I don't know. I don't know if you could have stood there at Coastal and said, is this going to change the amount of water going north or not? I don't know if Coastal knew of the contour of the removal of the triangle that we have pictorial evidence of, which I think changed not the quantity of water, but the direction of a quantity of the water. Those are all things, I guess, that are going to be looked at when they look at the modifications that were done. Why tie your hands? Why tie my hands, quite frankly? Anyway, thank you.
Please come back up.
I have a question.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is where you get into trouble when I'm not gonna try as a lawyer to rebut the drainage argument, other than to make the point that I think I heard Mr. Chappelle say at least 7 times, these infiltration trenches, there were so many more of them, now there's less of them. These are not infiltration trenches. That's the problem when lawyers try to be engineers. They weren't designed to manage stormwater. They were not part of the drainage calculations for what would work in this area and what would not work in this area. It's just not an accurate argument. Now, I don't want you to trust me on that. I'm going to ask Lynn Small to come up and to try to explain that. That was the biggest thing that Mr. Chappelle had to say, and he may believe that, but I might believe it too if somebody that was not an engineer told me that all these great bells and whistles really were necessary after all, when they weren't, and they weren't part of the original design. And CRMC advocated for these changes. It wasn't as if we tried to do some cost cutting and took things off the plan. This resulted from a CRMC review that had a purpose. Mr. Chappelle was the lawyer for this project, bringing the project forward. He was the owner presenting the application to CRMC to do, well, he signed the application as the owner, as he said. These are his plans. You know, I don't see how everything gets backwards here and criticizing a history that he was intimately involved in creating. And it seems like there's just a delay. The more, this project has to get closed out at some point. We can't wait a year to see what's gonna happen when there isn't anything that's been introduced here, including by your own consultant, that indicates that we're doing anything wrong on our site to contribute in any way to any drainage problems that are occurring somewhere else. That was true when this board first approved it. And the only thing that's changed is that the water quality has gotten better. The design of water quality features has been enhanced by CRMC. That's the consensus of the engineers, but I'd like ours to get a chance to speak, a real engineer who really understands the watershed here and the stormwater management system that the CRMC has approved.
Okay. I just, again, I'm gonna say something, nothing to do with Mr. Chappelle being a lawyer. I just, years of being on the board, the people that live the land, know it better than engineers on paper, what should be and stuff like that. So there is a lot of validity to the people that live the land and own the land and live around it to know the final true end results, because we see the aftermath when all the stuff comes up. Unfortunately, Lynn Small is on this case, but we've had cases in the past that end results were not what they were supposed to be.
I understand that can happen, but I heard all of those people and I didn't question anybody's credibility. They all said that they had drainage issues historically.
Yeah.
And those were exacerbated last spring. Those issues were exacerbated for all of us who have water falling on our properties. And it was a double whammy of the weather and the fact that you're gonna, it's like the cover of a pool table that that water's falling on. It's not what it's falling on right now.
Right,
That-
no, I understand.
But I've gone as far as I want to go.
Yep.
Pretending to be an expert on drainage. I want to refer to my
We'll get that
engineer.
expert up here. Yeah.
And just to add, yeah, owners know best to an extent. They get surprised as well. At the end of the day, we have asked for the independent third-party engineering assessment and the technical analysis from a professional to guide us.
Yep. Well, we have to
Reluctant
justify.
to add, I like gut instinctive what we feel our guide through the data.
Good evening. Lynn Small, Northeast Engineers, Six Valley Road in Middletown. A couple things I wanted to point on. First is, this is the first time I've ever been back to a planning board because CRMC made modifications to a project. I've been doing this for over 25 years. So this is rare. Every 100% of the time, when CRMC engineers review our designs after being approved by a planning board, those engineers' reviews and the biologist's recommendations are followed and administratively approved at the building permit, and then the building official signs off on what that building permit plan was. And that's the end of it. Because of parties involved, we're here, and that's fine. We're doing a modification to the town's permit. I also want to be clear that CRMC has specific criteria when you try to apply for a modification. And Court had mentioned the limit of disturbance line, and that is true. Your limit of disturbance is defined when you do your permitting. You have your site area, your total lot, or your watershed area, which may be irrelevant of lot lines, because your watershed is your watershed. It could include areas off-site. And then you have your limit of disturbance. This is the area where all your construction happens, and some of that limited disturbance might extend into the right-of-way, because maybe you're tying into utilities. But that's your limits of construction disturbance. If you, and you get your assent from CRMC, and that limit of disturbance is defined. If your work changes and you expand outside that limit of disturbance, you can't get a permit modification. You have to get a new permit. So when we say that we wanted to get a permit modification, no one ever argued that the work that was done extended beyond the limit of disturbance. There was, and my office, for what it's worth, all of our design plans include the entire site. We didn't define fence line or outside fence line. That came to be when my office was asked to write a letter saying that the project was completed in general conformance with the permit, and I said I can only do that if I use the limit of the fence line, because there's been a lot of alterations outside the fence line that aren't covered in any permits. So that's how my office handled that, and that's where the fence line came in as far as my office is concerned. When I say that, I mean the fence. No, the work, so if I was asked when the project was completed to prepare a letter for the building official that said that the drainage was in general compliance with the permit plans. Now, those permit plans were the ones that were issued the building permit for. Okay, we don't go back to all the iterations before that point, ever. So I said, well, there's been work that's been done outside the fence line. So I can write my letter stating that the work within the fence line is in general conformance with the permit plans. And that's when the fence line became part of some of our language, but that's it. And that's because you have, the items that the third-party reviewer identified, the roadway. Now, that's within the CRMC limit of disturbance, but it's not part of that permit. It's not allowed by that permit. It's outside the permit. It's in the limited disturbance, so you could technically get a modification if CRMC felt there was a need for a roadway there. You could add that to the plan. There's a dry well that's outside the fence line, which is not part of our permit, but it's inside the limited disturbance. That's part of the CRMC permit. I just want to make sure you guys are all understanding this terminology because it's important for this particular project.
Inside or outside the permit.
It's, right, so it's outside the approval. The CRMC assent does not include the dry well, does not include the gravel driveway. Okay, so I can't write a letter saying that you're compliant with your CRMC permit and your building permit if you have these things that are not compliant. So that's why I limited my letter to the fence line.
Why is CRMC only seeing it after the fact? Why isn't it not done before so we were not in this situation? Is it like an expense that?
No, we tried to do a CRMC permit modification. We couldn't get the application signed. It has to be signed by the owner. Now, for what that's worth, the CRMC permit modification application that I prepared preceded the dry well construction and preceded that gravel road construction. We prepared a CRMC permit modification package when it was brought to our attention that inadvertently the pool area and that we had that part of the project where they were going to be taking out a portion of the pool area, and that was something we didn't want to do. And we were reducing the scope of the project, bringing that fence line in so that the pool area could stay as it is under existing conditions. Okay.
I guess I didn't get a straight answer.
That,
Why in nature do we do the approval and then it goes to CRMC? Why doesn't CRMC see what was going to be submitted to us, and before it gets submitted to us, that they say, no, that's not going to work, we'd rather see you do this and that, and then we approve?
well, that is,
I don't remember a time that we supersede and say, no, we know better than CRMC. We would always go.
yeah, but the process has CRMC at the end. I can't change the law. That's the general statute where we get the town approval part of the CRMC submission, the building official has to say that the project is compliant and they'll issue a building permit. He can't do that if we don't come to you first. So it's always, that's just the way it is. Well, I would love to do all the permitting simultaneously, by the way. So if you can fix that, that'll help a lot of our clients. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to bring into your attention is that ditch or ASSF, okay? There's been a lot of conversation about that. And my original testimony that I gave to you in May said that that drainage area used to drain into the site, okay? Over time, we believe due to sediment accumulation, it inadvertently had a high point, it changed direction, a portion of it changed direction, and now a portion goes towards West Shore Road. My office ran the drainage calculations when we reevaluated the slope of that ASSF to make sure that our designs still worked. And now, I'm not going to tell you that during construction there wasn't an increase in runoff, because we did have bare soils at times. We had more intense rainstorms than we've ever had, or regularly, historically anyway. But if you had full the conditions you have today, even with that ASSF going the other direction towards West Shore Road versus towards the wetland, you have a reduction in your peak runoff. Without the stuff that was built outside the fence line, that berm, without the roadway, without the dry well. It's just the meadow. And the reason, if any increase in runoff to anyone resulted during construction, it was just that, because it was during construction. So if the berm was built as a temporary measure during construction to help mitigate that, so be it. But it's not part of the final permit plans. The other item, and does anybody have any questions about that? Okay, just so you're clear, the ASSF direction, irrelevant, ping pong balls aside, it runs the way it runs, and we've evaluated it both ways, and the project works fine, okay? The water quality trenches is the other item, and that's the stone trenches. Now, the project that you saw had a ton of them. That was not done correctly. I'm not even protecting myself. Okay, we misunderstood the guidance documents in the state. We put too many. There wasn't even supposed to be there. They were running cross gradient. It wasn't going to work. It would have worked as conveyance trenches. They would not have infiltrated. We didn't even model them as infiltrating. You could look at our drainage, and now they weren't even modeled. When we went to CRMC, we worked with the engineers. You guys don't have an engineer. We don't hold, your board's not an engineering board. You're a planning board. You don't, if you felt the project needed to be reviewed by an engineer at this point, you can send it to a third-party review. You can create a TRC. None of those things happened when this project was approved by you. You're not held accountable for making sure that engineering worked, right? But we worked with the engineers at CRMC after we got your approval here. And the engineers there asked us to fix the trenches so they ran parallel with the topography, and then to show that they had some infiltration. So that's what that report shows. Now, under zero conditions, does that infiltration get wrapped into the peak runoff for the project? Okay, it's just, we showed that it has some infiltration, but we never said this is going to make the peak runoff from this project this much better. You're not going to find that anywhere. So there is no, if we want to put how many cubic feet of stone that court calculated on this site, the plans you approved, we could equivalently dump a pile of stone on the site and get the same benefit. It didn't do anything. So I just want to make sure that's clear, because I don't want you to feel obligated to be comparing a plan that had no engineering review to one that was approved. And it didn't just get approved because we sent it in. It came back and forth a couple times. So it was reviewed and re-reviewed, and we made modifications based on their review. So it shouldn't be taken lightly, those recommendations from the CRMC. But I don't want you to feel obligated that you should be taking into account an unreviewed engineering design versus the one that was fully vetted. And normally, we come before you and we're like, we went to DOT, we went to DEM. That's why those things usually come out, you know, but this project, because it was all coastal, kind of skipped around that piece.
So appreciate the clarification. I think that's important because I think the root concern was the peak runoff that we were seeing in the spring. So sort of a separate question, but since we're on the stone or quality trenches, that was one of the recommendations, not specifically the 2,500 or 13,000. I think that's set. CRMC recommended the lower number. You explained why. But it was about the maintenance agreement. Can you confirm that exists, so that's in place, the maintenance agreement?
There is. Part of the,
It's supposed to be an annual thing. We're pretty much through a season. Has that happened once yet, by chance?
I don't believe the operation and maintenance of the trenches has happened yet. No, we do, as part of the approval through this board, have made some recommendations to shift some of the trenches so they run more parallel with some of the topography. What happened is the contractor built them exactly per plan, and there were some slight grade changes in a few areas, so you end up with a trench that runs mostly parallel and then it dips off. So we want to capture that end, so we are recommending that they fix some, and I would, you could stipulate as any approval that the existing trenches that are going to remain would be, you know, cleaned out of any sediment accumulation. And then once the project is given its occupancy permit, the normal operation and maintenance agreement, well, that's on record with you and it's on record with CRMC. So there's a few mechanisms in place where that can be enforced.
But so aside from the cleaning though, the M&O agreement, you just said that you need to still make some changes, or you did?
That's part of your permit plans that you have. There's just a few areas where we have some recommendations to reconfigure some of those.
That's part of the final plan.
When you, yes, and once this board approves that, they will do that work.
The motion will be to accept the modifications to the final plan.
Yeah, can I, well, you're up as the engineer. Is there anything else to expand on? I know the petitioner already spoke for that, but from a technical engineering standpoint, the Miranda report speaks to the non-conforming work, that what he's referencing is what the owner did, not what was done by the developed contractor as part of within the limited disturbance.
Right, so there was work that was done outside of the project that was not part of the CRMC permit. The only part of the project that has something that differs from the CRMC permit that could be related to the solar project is the exclusion of that pool area.
Right.
And they did we admittedly pulled the fence line in. I mean, if you ask someone from CRMC, they say, if you change anything, we want to see it. But they honestly probably wouldn't care if the fence line moved 10 feet in. You know, that doesn't change a thing by itself. Right, it has no impact
And
whatsoever.
the pool doesn't either?
The pool won't because it's, well, we were going to change it into a solar area, and now it's just kind of as existing. So we're not touching it, so it just stays as existing.
And it's in the low area too.
It's in the low area, and it drains more coastal than.
So in your view, the independent report that was provided gave really no evaluated recommendations beyond the water quality trenches that are in your petitioner jurisdiction to address.
Yes, yes, we have to do those, yeah.
And by your position, that you can see that, oh, yes, that's our responsibility to address further.
Yes. And they're reflected, our recommended changes to those water quality trenches is included on the permit modification plan to you.
Already got
It's
it.
shown, yeah.
All right.
No one has any else? Okay, thanks.
I guess there's still, I guess I'm still, I don't know if, the planning officer or anybody can speak to, I'm still confused to this non-permitted work,
I don't think that has anything to do
whether
with anything here. The way that I see it is just what's in their scope that CRMC changed from what we had approved, that we're just accepting the changes that CRMC has changed from what the original plan was.
Yeah, okay.
What happened outside the fence is not what's in question here. It may be if the neighbors are all ticked off and they want to come and find out, or if, my belief is with grass grown in, that probably will not come back to bite.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make a motion to grant the modification to the final plan, including the reduced perimeter fence line, removal of pool area, and the adjusted stone or water quality trenches as per CRMC comments, and really only stipulating on top of that that the water quality trenches are clean to sediment accumulation.
And I think the pool's not any longer part of this, right?
Yeah, he said
Right.
pool's removed.
Removal of the scope of work
Yeah,
from the
well,
scope of
okay,
work.
right, all right. Yeah.
Stipulating the water quality trenches be clean to sediment accumulation, which is really a requirement already by the M&O maintenance agreement. That's probably more of an enforcement issue, but let's stipulate that anyways.
Okay, have a second.
Second.
Okay, take a vote on that. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. Thanks, folks.
All right, next on the agenda is DiGregorio Corporation, applicant for a project delineated and described on plat of land entitled Spray Estates Subdivision, assesses plot 54, lot 17, Vanderbilt Lane, Portsmouth, Rhode Island, prepared by Northeast Engineers and Consultants, dated October 15th, 2017. The applicant's requesting a 50% road bond reduction from $475,210 to $237,605 related to the aforementioned subdivision. Hello there.
I feel bad, everyone just left. All right, so my name is Anthony DiGregorio. I'm here on behalf of the developer over at Spray, and it's pretty simple tonight, just asking for a bond reduction of 50% from $475,210 to $237,605. I believe Brian Woodhead had went over to the development. I don't know if this is the memo that's been presented.
Yeah,
To the
we
board?
do have that, yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, good. So, okay, honestly, I would prefer if you guys ask me about it, because I can give you some insight on timeline of construction, timeline where we can get these improvements done. A lot of these improvements would be completed upon the landowners finishing their homes. So I can't put the top on the road if homes aren't done. I can't raise the structures unless I put the top in. So some of these improvements wouldn't be considered until the development is 100% complete. So if I were to do all of these, I would be asking for 100% of the bond to be reduced. But there were some items that were inspected on September 27th. These are just some simple things that I could just do with a crew for a day or two, just going through the development quickly, just cleaning some rubbish, locating some of the structures, and I have some GPS equipment that can highlight some of the missing information here, but I believe that a 50% bond reduction is acceptable at this point in time. So if there's any questions from the board, I can address those.
Go ahead.
Mhm. Correct. Absolutely.
So I have a couple questions. The first two, I certainly understand, raising the structures and paving. Understand that, but the cleaning, installing monuments,
Mhm.
Submitting as-built, I understand, obtaining a letter from the engineer of record confirming that the drainage system's been installed and functioning properly. I think all those could probably be done now.
I can certainly work on those, but more or less 100% at this point in time does seem a little heavy for us, considering this has been almost like 4 years now, and I think this is what the developer's seeking at this time. So just asking for a little leniency from the board.
I'm not
Yeah.
opposed to helping you out. I understand you got some money on the table here. But there was also some other things that needed to be addressed in the second part of this with, they could not locate an underground sand filter UG2
Mhm.
because of vegetation. Riprap spillway needed to be cleaned. I assume you have these photos that were also
Yes.
provided, okay. And then, another one on the sand filter and the saplings. I'm not speaking for the board, but I think you gotta put a timeline to these so that we can figure that out.
So, and these are items on the September 27th.
Correct.
I believe I can, if I can get a crew together, I don't want to put an exact date to it, but I
Well,
can.
that's what you're gonna have to do.
I can certainly, monuments are very important, and I agree with that. That's what I would like to do a little bit towards the end of the project, once all the structures are built, but if I would like to say by the,
Give yourself enough time.
I would like to have at least like a month or so to get.
How about 2 months?
2 months is perfect. I can work with 2 months to get these items done on well, for the September 27th items that was listed in that
Correct.
inspection, I can get those done in the next 2 months. And then would tonight be the reduction on the bond, or could that be done administratively?
So I think it would be conditioned on you completing those items, and then we would allow if the board so desires, we'd allow the town planner to administratively approve it, so you don't have to come back to us.
Okay. Just kind of like a timeline for me to work. Yeah,
And we're not singling you out. We've been down this road before,
Mhm.
and we end up with this. So that's why we have to kind of tie you to a date.
of course. No, and it gives me, I can go back to
Sure.
my guys and be like, guys, I got till
There you go.
end of November to get this done, so I find that acceptable, I would say.
Which things are we
So,
suggesting?
so I think this is just my suggestion, cleaning all drainage structures, installing the monuments, obtaining the letter from the engineer of record, and then the 4 items on the second piece. But I agree with you, sir, that raising the structures is not necessary at this time until you final pave, and, obviously the lumen seating. behind the berm. I don't believe that's necessary, and you don't have to submit the as-built until you're completely done.
Okay.
Did you get that all up?
I think installing the monuments might take me a little longer than 2 months if I have to get a surveyor. But I would feel comfortable if I can get the September 27th items accomplished in the next 2 months.
The monuments, as Ms. Wilson said, are very important to us
Mhm.
to make sure they get done. I don't know how many have to be installed, but I can't believe there's that many.
It's not a lot, but I know these surveyors, they get backed up, and if for 2 months, that might be a little tight for
Well,
me.
maybe the motion will say that if you can produce a letter as to when your survey will be there, we'll allow Ms. Hitchin to monitor that and make a decision.
Okay, so installing the monuments, obtaining the letter from the engineer, and then the items listed in the September 27th inspection.
Correct.
Okay. And then once those are completed, it would be done administratively.
Administratively.
Okay.
Is that fair?
I can work with it.
Okay.
I can work with that. I think, other than that, I'd like to also, so to protect the town, I don't want to just agree to like, yep, we can get the 50%, but I also want to try and give you a timeline for when we can put the top on the road and raising the structures, because I feel as though that's important to the town as well. So I do want to get in touch with the people who are building the homes, just to get a timeline for their construction, just so that I can provide something to the town. So it's not just like, hey, I have to come back here again eventually. So
That'd be great.
So every lot is under construction and it is on its way to being done. I just want to make sure I go back to the people who bought them and be like, when do you think we're going to be done? Because there are stuff that we're tied to do. And I think they would obviously appreciate
It's for
if these
everybody's
items were done.
benefit, Yeah.
So I would like to do that for you as well. I don't want to just like abandon that idea at this point in time. So I'm ready to go with those 2 months. I can get a lot of these things started tomorrow, so.
Well, we need to put it in the form of a motion and vote on it, so.
Pressing outside, paying items highlighted. Letter on October 2024, specifically, completion. 4 items highlighted by the inspection. 7/24. In 2 months, I'll say by December 12th. And that those, conjunction, but also planning wall drainage structures, inspection by public works. Getting the letter, hearing from install.
Process, there you go.
I find that to be reasonable.
Yeah, the sapling's being moved is one of the 4, so I think we got that captured. Tracy, you got that? Do you have all it on the motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All right. Yeah. Okay. So we got a motion. Do we have a second? Luke, second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion carries.
Awesome.
You're all set.
Thank you.
All right. Next up on our agenda, I think that's it. We're adjourned. Yeah, do we have to do anything special for the next meeting, Leah?
We don't have to do anything special in terms of notifying Secretary of State or anything. There have been some issues in terms of getting people to attend the next meeting, which is
It would have been,
November 14th. And I'm asking if we can change the meeting to November 20th,
20th. Okay.
which is a Wednesday.
Do we need a motion for that, or are you good?
It's not even on the agenda.
Okay, yeah, it's not on the agendas, but I think all of us can accommodate that.
Thank you.
All righty. A motion to adjourn? Luke first, Dave second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, we're adjourned. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.